could you do this to my daughter?
It was 2 in the morning when I found myself standing in my son's driveway, clutching a manila envelope so tightly my knuckles had gone pale. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and the October air bit at my skin through my jacket. I watched my son Derek pull up in his BMW, and there was a woman in the passenger seat. A woman with auburn hair and a laugh I could hear through the closed windows. A woman who wasn't his wife. Derek's face went slack when he saw me standing there. The woman stopped laughing. And in that moment, standing in that driveway with evidence of everything he'd done in my hands, I realized something terrifying. I raised him better than this. But watching him parade women around while Celeste fought for her life in that hospital bed, I became someone I didn't recognize. And what I did next? It destroyed everything. My name is Janice Crawford, and this is the story of how I tried to save my daughter-in-law's dignity and ended up losing my son in the process. I'm 58 years old, and if you'd asked anyone who knew me, they would have told you I was a good woman. A godly woman. For 12 years, I've lived alone in a modest brick house in suburban Atlanta, the same house where I raised my son after his father died. James, my husband, was killed in a construction accident when Derek was only 14. One moment he was working on a high-rise downtown, and the next I was a widow with a teenage boy and a nursing career that barely kept us afloat. I worked double shifts at Grady Memorial for years. Morning shift, evening shift, sometimes pulling weekends back to back. My feet ached constantly, and I survived on coffee and the hope that my sacrifice meant something. I wanted Derek to have what James and I never did. An education. Opportunities. A future that didn't require breaking your body to survive. And Derek, he was my golden child. He got a full scholarship to Georgia State, graduated with honors, landed a job in corporate finance at one of those firms with glass offices and expensive coffee machines. By 32 he was a manager, pulling in 6 figures, driving a BMW that cost more than I made in 2 years. He was handsome too, with his father's smile and my determination. He wore tailored suits and Italian shoes, and when he walked into a room people noticed. I was so proud of him. So incredibly proud. 7 years ago, Derek married Celeste Hammond, and I remember thinking God had finally given me the daughter I'd always wanted. Celeste was 31 now, just a year younger than Derek, and she taught 2nd grade at an elementary school in Decatur. She had one of those faces that made you want to trust her immediately. Warm brown eyes, a smile that crinkled at the corners, and this sweet, gentle nature that made even the most difficult children in her class adore her. Celeste saw the best in everyone. Even when she shouldn't have. She and we became close in a way I never expected. She'd call me just to talk, ask my advice on recipes, invite me over for Sunday dinners. When she and Derek bought their house, a beautiful 2-story with a wraparound porch, she insisted on setting up a guest room just for me. She'd joked that I was the mother she wished she'd had growing up. Her own mama had passed when she was young, and her father remarried someone who never quite warmed to her. I loved that girl. Loved her like she came from my own body. And then, 18 months ago, everything changed. Celeste started feeling tired all the time. She'd come home from teaching and barely have the energy to make dinner. Then came the pain in her breast, a lump she found during a self-exam. The mammogram. The biopsy. The word that turns your blood to ice. Cancer. Stage 4 breast cancer. Aggressive. Already spread to her lymph nodes. I held her hand in that doctor's office while Derek sat there looking like someone had hit him with a bat. The oncologist talked about treatment options, survival rates, clinical trials. Celeste cried silently, tears streaming down her face while she nodded and took notes like she was preparing a lesson plan instead of fighting for her life. That was 6 months ago. Since then I've watched Celeste go through hell. Chemotherapy that made her so sick she couldn't keep water down. Radiation that burned her skin. Hair falling out in clumps until she finally shaved it all off. She lost 30 pounds from a frame that didn't have 30 pounds to lose. Some days she was so weak she couldn't get out of bed. But she kept teaching as long as she could, kept smiling, kept saying she was going to beat this thing. 3 weeks ago she had to take medical leave. The cancer had progressed despite everything. Her doctors admitted her to St. Vincent's Hospital for more intensive treatment. That's when she became a permanent resident of room 412, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred, pumped full of drugs that were supposed to kill the cancer without killing her. And that's when I started noticing Derek's absences. At first it was understandable. He'd visit for an hour after work, hold Celeste's hand, tell her about his day. But the visits got shorter. Then less frequent. He started making excuses. Important meeting. Client dinner. Emergency at work. His phone was always ringing, always pulling him away. I covered for him. When Celeste would ask where he was, I'd say he was working hard to keep their insurance active, to pay for the treatments. I'd say he was researching clinical trials, talking to specialists. I made him sound like a devoted husband doing everything he could. But I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew something was wrong. It was a Thursday evening when everything came into focus. I'd spent the afternoon with Celeste at St. Vincent's. She'd had a rough day, couldn't keep anything down, and the pain medication made her drift in and out of consciousness. I sat by her bed reading my Bible, watching her chest rise and fall, praying harder than I'd prayed since the night James died. Around 7, Celeste woke up. She turned her head slowly, and even that small movement seemed to exhaust her. Her skin had taken on a grayish tone, and the bones in her face stood out sharp and prominent. She looked so small in that hospital bed, like she was disappearing a little more each day. She reached for my hand. Her grip was weak, her fingers cold. "Janice," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Have you seen Derek? He hasn't been here in 3 days." My heart cracked right down the middle. I plastered on a smile, squeezed her hand gently. "Oh honey, you know how crazy work gets. He's dealing with some big project. He told me he'd try to stop by tonight after his meeting." Celeste's eyes, sunken and shadowed, searched my face. For just a moment I saw something there. She knew I was lying. She knew, and she was giving me permission to keep lying because the truth was too much to bear while fighting for your life. "Okay," she said quietly. "Tell him I love him when you see him." "I will, baby. I will." I stayed until she fell asleep again, then I gathered my purse and jacket, kissed her forehead, and walked out of that hospital feeling like someone had hollowed me out with a spoon. I got in my car and just sat there in the parking garage for a long time, listening to the echo of footsteps and car engines. My late husband's watch, which I always wore on my left wrist, ticked steadily. James would have known what to do. He always knew how to talk to Derek, how to reach him when I couldn't. But James was gone, and I was alone with this terrible knowing that my son was failing the woman who loved him most. I drove home on autopilot, my mind spinning. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Derek really was buried in work, stressed about money, dealing with his grief in his own way. Maybe I was being unfair. But when I turned onto Derek Street at 9:30 that night, just to see if his car was there, just to quiet that voice in my head, I found his driveway empty. The house was dark. Wherever my son was, it wasn't at work, and it wasn't with his dying wife. Something inside me broke in that moment. Something that had been bending and bending under the weight of watching Celeste suffer alone finally snapped clean through. I pulled away from his house and drove home, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, James's watch ticking on my nightstand, and I made a decision. If Derek wasn't going to be there for Celeste, then I needed to know why. I needed to know what was more important than the woman who'd stood beside him for 7 years, who'd loved him through everything, who was now fighting the fight of her life. I needed to know what kind of son I'd raised. The next morning I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I noticed that Derek's social media, which he rarely used, had suddenly gone quiet. No posts, no photos, nothing. I noticed that when I called him, he often didn't answer, and when he did, he sounded distracted, eager to get off the phone. Before you judge me for what I did next, let me ask you something. What would you do if your child was betraying someone you loved? Would you look away? Would you mind your business? Would you let it happen without saying a word? Drop your answer in the comments because I need to know if what I did makes me a villain or just a mother who loved too much. I started following him. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me look obsessive, unhinged even. But I had to know. I convinced myself I was protecting Celeste, gathering information, preparing to confront Derek with evidence so he couldn't lie his way out of it. But if I'm being honest, really honest, I was also punishing him. Catching him in the act. Making sure he couldn't pretend to be the grieving husband while doing God knows what behind everyone's back. It only took 3 days to confirm my worst fears. If you're not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button now because this story gets darker before it gets better, and you're going to want to see how everything falls apart. On Monday evening, I followed Derek from his office in Buckhead. He didn't go home. He didn't go to the hospital. He drove to an upscale restaurant in Midtown, one of those places with valet parking and candles on every table. And when he got out of his BMW, he wasn't alone. A woman stepped out of the passenger side. She was in her late 20s, blonde hair styled in perfect waves, wearing a dress that probably cost what I used to make in a week. She was beautiful in that polished magazine cover way. And when Derek came around the car, he put his hand on the small of her back and guided her toward the restaurant entrance like they'd done this 100 times before. I sat in my car across the street, hands shaking, watching them disappear inside. That's when I knew. My son, my golden boy, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was seeing other women while his wife lay dying in a hospital bed. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing them together, Derek's hand on that woman's back, the easy way they moved together like they'd done it 1,000 times. I lay in my bed listening to James's watch tick in the darkness, and I felt something ugly growing inside me. Shame. Rage. Grief for Celeste. And beneath it all, this suffocating disappointment in the man I'd raised. But I couldn't stop. The next day I told myself I was done, that I'd seen enough, that I needed to confront Derek and end this. Yet when evening came, I found myself parked down the street from his office again, waiting. Watching. I felt pathetic. A 58-year-old woman playing detective, spying on her own son like some obsessed stalker. I kept my engine running, ready to leave, telling myself this was the last time. Just one more time to be sure. Just one more time to confirm what I already knew. Derek left his office at 6:15. I followed him through Atlanta traffic, staying 3 cars back like I'd seen in movies. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. My heart hammered in my chest. Part of me hoped he'd drive to the hospital, prove me wrong, show me I was being a paranoid old woman who'd let her imagination run wild. He didn't go to the hospital. He went to a wine bar in Virginia Highland, one of those trendy places with exposed brick and string lights hanging from the ceiling. And this time, a different woman was waiting for him outside. She was a brunette. Tall, model thin, wearing tight jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She had the kind of beauty that made other women feel invisible. High cheekbones, full lips, legs that went on forever. When Derek pulled up, she smiled and waved, and he parked illegally right in front, like he couldn't wait the extra 30 seconds to find a legal spot. I watched him get out of his BMW. Watched him walk straight to her and pull her into a hug that lasted too long. Watched him slide his arm around her waist as they walked into the wine bar together, his hand resting possessively on her hip. I sat in my car feeling like I might vomit. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a pattern. My son had multiple women. While Celeste withered away in a hospital bed, hooked to machines that kept her alive, Derek was living like a single man. Like his wife was already dead and buried. I took pictures. My hands shook so badly the first few were blurred, but I steadied myself and got clear shots. Derek and the brunette through the window, sitting at a high-top table. His arms still around her. Both of them laughing. Her hand on his knee. I stayed for 2 hours, watching them drink wine and share appetizers and touch each other in ways that made my stomach turn. When they finally left, Derek walked her to a silver Mercedes, kissed her on the cheek, and watched her drive away before getting in his own car. I followed him home. His house, the one he shared with Celeste, the one with the wraparound porch where we'd had Sunday dinners and celebrated holidays. He went inside alone and the lights came on in the living room. I wondered if he felt anything. Guilt. Shame. Remorse. Or if he'd gotten so good at compartmentalizing that he could live 2 lives without them ever touching. Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. I tracked my son like he was a criminal. I learned his patterns, his routines, where he went and when. I started keeping a notebook, writing down dates and times and locations. I took more pictures. I even did something I'm deeply ashamed of. I created a fake social media profile and sent friend requests to both women. The blonde accepted first. Her name was Bryn Keller. 27 years old, worked in marketing, loved brunch and yoga and posting inspirational quotes about living your best life. Her Instagram was full of photos from expensive restaurants, designer handbags, vacation spots I'd never afford. She posted a picture from that first restaurant, tagged the location, captioned it, "Perfect evening with my favorite person," with a heart emoji. I felt sick. The brunette took longer to accept, but eventually she did too. Sienna Rodriguez. 29, some kind of consultant based on her LinkedIn profile. She was more private, fewer posts, but what she did share showed a life of luxury. First-class plane tickets. High-end hotels. Wine collections. There was a photo from the wine bar where I'd seen her with Derek, just a picture of 2 wine glasses touching, captioned, "Cheers to new beginnings." New beginnings. While Celeste's life was ending. I knew I had to confront Derek. I couldn't keep following him, couldn't keep torturing myself with evidence of his betrayal. I needed to hear him say it. Needed him to explain how the boy I raised could do something this cruel. On a Wednesday afternoon after I'd visited Celeste at the hospital, I called him. He answered on the 4th ring and I could hear background noise. Music. Conversation. He was somewhere social while his wife lay in a hospital bed. "Hey mom, what's up?" Kind of in the middle of something. My voice came out colder than I intended. We need to talk, Derek. Can it wait? I'm at a work thing. No, it can't wait. I know what you've been doing. Silence. Then I heard him moving, the background noise fading. What are you talking about? The women, Derek. I've seen you with them. Multiple women. While Celeste is fighting for her life. More silence. When he spoke again, his voice was hard, defensive. Are you following me? Are you seriously following me around like some kind of crazy person? Answer the question. Are you cheating on your wife while she's dying? He laughed. Actually laughed. A bitter, harsh sound. You don't understand, Mom. You couldn't possibly understand. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how you could do this. I heard him take a deep breath. I'm handling things my way. Celeste she's already gone. The doctor said months, maybe weeks. You've seen her. She's not getting better. She's wasting away and I can't just sit there and watch her die. I can't do it. My hands tightened around my phone. So you're practicing for your next life while she's still living hers? Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what it's like. I've been grieving for a year already. A whole year of watching the woman I married disappear piece by piece. The cancer took her before she even got sick. Our life together? It's over. It's been over. I'm just trying to survive this. By disrespecting her? By humiliating her? She doesn't know, Mom. And she doesn't need to know. What purpose would it serve? She's dying. Let her die in peace thinking I'm the devoted husband. At least give her that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think this is mercy? You think lying to her while you run around with other women is some kind of gift? I think you need to stay out of my marriage and my life. I'm handling this the best way I know how. Celeste is getting the best care. She has everything she needs. What I do outside that hospital doesn't change anything. It changes everything, Derek. It changes who you are. I'm a human being, Mom. I'm 32 years old and I'm losing my wife. I'm allowed to cope however I need to cope. And I don't need your permission or your approval. She's not gone yet. She's still here. Still breathing. Still loving you. His voice went quiet, almost a whisper. That's what makes it so hard. Then he hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, shaking with anger and heartbreak. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to wherever he was and drag him to that hospital by his ear like he was 14 again. I wanted to shake him until the son I raised came back. But that son was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed. Maybe I'd been so busy trying to give Derek a better life that I'd forgotten to teach him how to be a better man. The next day I went to see Celeste. I'd been visiting her every other day, but after that phone call with Derek, I needed to see her. Needed to sit with the woman who was suffering while my son played house with strangers. Room 412 always smelled like disinfectant and something else I couldn't name. Death maybe. Or just sickness so deep it seeped into the walls. Celeste was asleep when I arrived and she looked worse than I'd ever seen her. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin almost translucent. The machines beeped steadily, monitoring a body that was losing its fight. I sat in the chair beside her bed and held her hand. It was so small in mine, all bones and papery skin. I thought about all the times this hand had helped me cook Sunday dinner, arranged flowers in vases, held mine during sad movies. I thought about how unfair it was that someone so good, so kind, was being taken while people who didn't deserve their health got to keep it. Celeste's eyes opened slowly. It took her a moment to focus on me, and when she did, she smiled weakly. Hey, Mama January. That's what she called me. Mama January. It always made my heart swell. Hey, baby girl. How you feeling today? Tired? Her voice was barely a whisper. Always tired. I know, honey. I know. We sat in silence for a while. Then Celeste's grip on my hand tightened just slightly. She turned her head to look at me, and there was something in her eyes. Something that made my breath catch. I know about the women. My heart stopped. Celeste. I've known for months. I can see it on his face when he finally shows up. The guilt. The way he can't quite meet my eyes. The perfume on his collar he thinks I'm too sick to notice. Tears were streaming down my face before I could stop them. Why didn't you say anything? What good would it do? Make him feel worse? Make my last days filled with fighting and accusations? She paused, breathing hard from the effort of talking. But Janice, I still love him. Even knowing what he's doing, I still love him. Isn't that pathetic? No, baby. That's not pathetic. That's just love. I don't want to die angry. I don't want to die bitter. I want... She coughed, and I held a cup of water to her lips. I want my last memory of him to be something good. Even if it's a lie. I wiped my eyes with my free hand. Celeste. Promise me you won't hate him. Promise me that after I'm gone you'll forgive him. He's going to need his mother. He's going to fall apart and he's going to need you. I couldn't speak. Couldn't force the words out. Promise me, Janice. I opened my mouth to promise, to give her the peace she was asking for, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't promise to forgive Derek. Not for this. Not for making her last days lonelier than they should have been. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. She understood my silence. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep, and I sat there holding her hand, crying quietly so I wouldn't wake her. I left the hospital an hour later and sat in my car in the parking garage. And I cried. I cried for Celeste, for the unfairness of her suffering. I cried for Derek, for whatever had broken inside him that made him capable of this. I cried for myself, for the loss of the son I thought I knew. I cried until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw, until I had no tears left. Then I drove home. I went straight to my computer, opened it up and created a new folder. I titled it, Derek. Then I uploaded every photo I'd taken. Every screenshot from Bryn and Sienna's social media. Every note I'd made about dates and times and locations. I organized it all methodically, clinically, like I was building a case file. And I was building evidence. Of what, I wasn't entirely sure yet. But I was documenting my son's betrayal with the same precision I'd once used to chart patients' vitals during my nursing shifts. Part of me knew this was dangerous. Knew I was crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. But another part of me, the part that had watched Celeste waste away while Derek played at being single, couldn't stop. I didn't know what I was going to do with all this information. I didn't have a plan yet. But I had evidence. And evidence meant power. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button because what happens next changed everything, and not in the way any of us expected. I kept following Derek. I kept documenting. And the more I learned, the angrier I became. It wasn't just 2 women. Over the next 2 weeks, I saw him with Bryn 3 more times. I saw him with Sienna twice. And then I saw him with a 3rd woman. Her name was Kira and she was different from the others. Younger, maybe 24 or 25. She had this innocent quality about her, big eyes and a shy smile. She didn't look like someone who'd knowingly date a married man. She looked like someone who'd been lied to. I watched Derek bring her to his house, the house he shared with Celeste. I watched them go inside together on a Saturday afternoon. They stayed for 3 hours. When she left, she kissed him goodbye on the front porch, right under the porch light Celeste had picked out at Home Depot 2 years ago. Something snapped in me that night. Something that had been bending and straining finally broke clean through. I went home and stared at my computer screen for a long time. At the folder full of evidence. At the photos of my son living a life his dying wife knew nothing about. At proof of betrayals that would break Celeste's heart if she had the strength left to break. I thought about what Celeste had asked me. To forgive him. To not hate him. To be there for him when she was gone. And I thought about what Derek had said. That he was handling things his way. That Celeste was already gone. That he was entitled to move on even while she was still breathing. I looked at James's watch on my wrist. Thought about the man who'd worn it before me. What would James do? Would he confront Derek? Demand he be better? Or would he respect his son's choices, even when those choices were destroying someone we both loved? I didn't know. But I knew what I was going to do. I was going to make sure Derek faced consequences for what he'd done. I was going to make sure those women knew who they were really dating. I was going to burn down the carefully constructed lie my son was living. Was I right to do what I did next? That's for you to decide. Drop a comment and tell me, if someone you loved was dying and their partner was betraying them, would you expose the truth or let them die in peace with their illusions? Because I chose exposure. And what happened next destroyed my family in ways I never imagined. It took me 3 weeks to build the profiles. 3 weeks of careful, methodical work that would have made my younger self ashamed. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd crossed a line the moment I started following Derek, and now I was so far past that line I couldn't even see it in my rearview mirror. I created 3 fake Facebook profiles. Each one had to look real, lived in, authentic. I used stock photos of middle-aged women, the kind of generic faces that blend into any crowd. I named them Patricia Hughes, Michelle Torres, and Linda Brennan. I spent hours building their histories, posting random thoughts, sharing articles, joining groups. I made them look like real people with real lives. Then I sent friend requests to Bryn, Sienna, and Kira. Bryn accepted Patricia within 2 days. She was the type who accepted everyone, her friend count pushing past 2,000. Sienna was more selective, but Michelle got through after a week. Kira took the longest. She was cautious, probably because she was younger, more aware of internet dangers. But Linda's profile looked harmless enough. A church-going woman who shared recipes and inspirational quotes. Kira accepted after 10 days. I felt disgusting doing it. Every click, every fake post, every carefully crafted comment on their photos made me feel like I was betraying something fundamental about who I was. But every time I thought about stopping, I'd picture Celeste in that hospital bed. I'd remember her asking me if I'd seen Derek. I'd think about her whispering that she knew about the women but still loved him anyway. And I'd keep going. I watched their lives through their social media posts. Bryn posted constantly. Selfies at the gym, brunches with girlfriends, pictures of her morning coffee. She posted a photo of flowers with the caption, "He always knows how to make me smile," and I knew they were from Derek. I'd seen him carrying a bouquet to his car 3 days earlier. Sienna was more subtle. She'd post a glass of wine, a sunset, a quote about finding happiness. But I could read between the lines. She was in a relationship with someone she thought was available. Someone who was giving her just enough attention to keep her interested but not enough to make her suspicious. Kira broke my heart. Her posts were innocent, sweet. Pictures of her cat, her nursing school textbooks, her small apartment decorated with string lights and thrift store furniture. She posted about studying for her boards, about her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse. She reminded me of myself at that age, full of hope and trust, believing people when they told her things. Derek was lying to all of them. I knew that much. Each woman thought she was special, thought she was the one. None of them knew about Celeste. None of them knew about each other. I spent another week gathering the right photos. I took screenshots from Bryn's Instagram showing her and Derek at that restaurant. I had pictures of Sienna and Derek at the wine bar. I'd followed Derek and Kira to a movie theater, to a park, to a coffee shop. I documented everything. But the most damaging photo was one I took at the hospital. I'd visited Celeste on a Tuesday afternoon. She was sleeping, her hospital bracelet visible on her thin wrist. The machines around her bed beeped steadily, monitoring her failing body. I took a picture. Just one. Celeste's hand with that bracelet, the machines in the background, the hospital bed. You couldn't see her face, but you could see everything else. The tubes. The monitors. The reality of what Derek was hiding from these women. I stared at that photo for a long time before I used it. This felt different from the others. This felt like a violation of Celeste's privacy, even though she wasn't identifiable. But I told myself she'd want the truth out there. She'd want these women to know who they were really involved with. I'm not sure I believed that, but it made it easier to press send. On a Sunday night at exactly 9 p.m. I sent the messages. To Bryn from Patricia. I thought you should know who you're dating. Attached were photos of Derek with Sienna and Kira. Photos of Celeste's hospital bracelet. A screenshot showing Derek's marital status as married on an old Facebook profile he'd forgotten to delete. And a link to Celeste's Caringbridge page, where she'd been documenting her cancer journey before she got too sick to write. To Sienna from Michelle, the same message. Different photos, same devastating truth. To Kira from Linda, I wrote a longer message to her. I'm sorry to tell you this, but the man you're seeing is married. His wife is in the hospital dying of cancer. He's been seeing multiple women. You seem like a sweet girl and I thought you deserved to know the truth. Then I closed my laptop, went to my bedroom and waited. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to James's watch tick, wondering what I'd just done. Wondering if this made me righteous or vindictive. Wondering if there was even a difference anymore. The explosion happened faster than I expected. Monday morning I got a text from Derek at 7 a.m. We need to talk. Now. I didn't respond. I went to the hospital instead, sat with Celeste. She was having a better day, more alert than usual. We talked about her students, the ones who'd sent her cards and drawings. She showed me a picture a little girl named Emma had made, a rainbow with, "Get well soon, Miss Celeste," written in crayon. They miss you, I told her. I miss them too. I keep thinking maybe I'll get back for the end of the school year. Maybe I'll see them graduate to 3rd grade. We both knew she wouldn't. But I smiled and said, maybe you will, baby. Maybe you will. My phone buzzed constantly while I sat with her. Derek calling. Derek texting. I ignored it all. Around noon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Crawford? This is Jennifer Maloney. I work in HR at Piedmont Financial Group with your son Derek. My stomach dropped. Yes. I'm calling to let you know that Derek's been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into some serious allegations. There was an incident at the office this morning that we're looking into. I can't share details, but I wanted you to know. What kind of incident? I really can't say more. But Derek listed you as his emergency contact, so I felt you should be aware. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I found out what happened from Derek's co-worker, a woman named Tasha who attended my church. She called me that evening, her voice hushed and scandalized. Girl, you won't believe what happened at Derek's office today. This woman showed up screaming about how he'd been lying to her, how he was married, how he was a cheater. Security had to escort her out. She was yelling about his dying wife, saying horrible things. Everyone heard it. The whole floor. That would be Bryn. She'd always been the loud one. And that's not even the worst part, Tasha continued. Someone recorded part of it and it's been circulating in the company chat. Then another woman posted on Facebook about him, tagged his company and everything. Tagged like mutual friends. It's everywhere, Janice. People are talking about it on LinkedIn even. His professional reputation is destroyed. That would be Sienna. Always the strategic one. Does Derek know who sent the information to these women? I don't know. But girl, he looked wrecked today. I've never seen him like that. He left right after the woman got escorted out, and they called him later about the administrative leave. I thanked Tasha and hung up. My hands were shaking. This was bigger than I'd expected. I'd wanted Derek to face consequences, but I hadn't thought about his job, his career. I'd been so focused on punishing him that I hadn't considered the collateral damage. My phone rang again. Derek. This time I answered. What did you do? His voice was shaking with rage. What the hell did you do, Mom? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I know it was you. The messages all came through accounts created in the same week. The writing style, the way they were worded, it's all you. You did this. You destroyed my life. I stayed silent. Bryn showed up at my office screaming. Sienna posted about me on every social media platform she has, tagged my company, my colleagues, everyone. And Kira? His voice cracked. Kira called me sobbing. She had no idea. She thought I was divorced. She thought we had a future. She's 24 years old and I made her feel like she was destroying a marriage. She's devastated. Good, I thought. But I didn't say it. Those women, they've contacted HR. Someone recorded Bryn yelling at me and it's been shared in every company chat group. Screenshots of Sienna's posts are everywhere. I'm on administrative leave. They're investigating whether my personal conduct violates the company's ethics policies. I might lose my job. Do you understand that? I might lose my career. All because you couldn't mind your own business. Your wife is dying, I said quietly. And you're worried about your reputation? Celeste is gone, Mom. He was shouting now. Maybe not physically yet, but she's gone. The woman I married doesn't exist anymore. She's a shell hooked up to machines. I've been grieving her for over a year. I'm allowed to move on. I'm allowed to find some happiness while I watch my wife die. Not like this. Not while she's still breathing. Not while she's lying in that hospital bed thinking you're at work or too busy to visit. Not while she's making excuses for you to me. You had no right. No right to interfere in my life, to contact those women, to destroy everything I've built. And you had no right to betray a woman who's loved you unconditionally for 7 years. A woman who's fighting for her life while you play house with strangers. How did you even find them? Were you following me? Stalking me? I didn't answer. You were. Jesus Christ, Mom, you were stalking me. Creating fake profiles. Catfishing these women just so you could blow up my life. Do you know how insane that sounds? Do you know what you've become? Do you know what you've become, Derek? Because the son I raised wouldn't do what you've done. The boy I worked double shifts for, the boy I sacrificed everything to give a better life, that boy would never abandon his wife when she needed him most. That boy grew up. That boy became a man who's watched his wife waste away for 18 months. Who's had to make decisions about DNR orders and hospice care. Who's had to plan a funeral while she's still alive. You think those women were about me being selfish? They were about me trying to feel human again. Trying to remember what it's like to be with someone who isn't dying. Who can laugh without coughing. Who can hold my hand without it feeling like holding bones. His voice broke and he started crying. Real, gut-wrenching sobs. And for just a moment I felt it. The weight of what he'd been carrying. The impossible position he was in. The grief of losing someone slowly day by day while they're still alive. But then I thought about Celeste asking where he was. About her whispered confession that she knew about the women but still loved him. About her asking me not to hate him, and my inability to promise her I wouldn't. I'm sorry you're hurting, I said. I'm sorry this is hard. But it doesn't excuse what you've done. I don't need excuses. I need my mother to stay out of my life. I need you to stop interfering, stop judging, stop trying to control me. I'm trying to protect Celeste. Celeste is dying. She's going to be dead in weeks, maybe days, and then what? You'll still be judging me? Still punishing me for trying to survive this? Not like this. There were right ways to handle this, Derek. You could have been honest with her. You could have had conversations about moving on. You could have waited. But instead you lied. You snuck around. You disrespected her and your marriage and yourself. I figured it out, you know. How you did it. The IP addresses led back to coffee shops near your house. The profile photos were stock images. The writing style matched your text. And the photo of Celeste's hospital bracelet? That was the giveaway. Only someone who'd been visiting her would have that. Only you. My heart was pounding. I hadn't thought about being traced. I could report you, Derek continued. What you did, creating fake profiles, sending those photos, some of which were taken without permission, it's probably illegal. Harassment. Invasion of privacy. Identity fraud. I could press charges. Do it then. Press charges. Let's stand in front of a judge and explain why you're suing your mother for exposing your infidelity while your wife dies. Silence. Long and heavy. I never want to see you again, Derek finally said. Don't call me. Don't come to my house. Don't visit Celeste when you know I'll be there. Stay out of my life. Derek. I mean it, Mom. You're dead to me. Just like you wanted to make sure my relationships were dead. We're done. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, my hand pressed to my chest. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I'd known there would be consequences. I'd known Derek would be angry. But hearing him say I was dead to him, hearing him cut me out of his life completely, it hit me harder than I expected. I'd lost my son. In trying to protect Celeste, in trying to punish Derek for his betrayals, I'd severed the most important relationship in my life. If you've made it this far, please hit that subscribe button because what happens next nobody saw coming. Not Derek, not me, and definitely not Celeste. Over the next 3 days, I learned the full extent of the damage I'd caused. Bryn had filed a formal complaint with Derek's company, alleging he'd lied about his marital status and used company resources to conduct his affairs. Whether that was true I didn't know, but the accusation alone was enough to trigger an investigation. Sienna's Facebook post had been shared hundreds of times. People Derek went to college with, people he worked with, people from our church, they all saw it. She'd written a long post about dating a man who said he was divorced, only to discover his wife was dying in a hospital. She didn't name Derek directly, but she included enough details that anyone who knew him could figure it out. She talked about the betrayal, the lies, the cruelty of it all. And people commented. They shared their own stories of being lied to. They called Derek names I won't repeat. They said he deserved everything coming to him. Kira was the one who hurt me most to hear about. She'd apparently called Derek repeatedly, trying to understand, trying to make sense of it. She'd thought he was a divorced finance manager starting over. He'd told her his ex-wife had left him, that he was lonely, that meeting her had given him hope again. She'd believed him because she was young and trusting, and why wouldn't you believe someone you cared about? When she found out the truth that his wife wasn't an ex but was actively dying, that he'd invented an entire fictional divorce, she'd been devastated. According to a mutual friend of a friend, Kira had dropped out of her nursing program temporarily. The guilt of unknowingly being involved with a married man, even though she was completely innocent, had broken something in her. I'd wanted to punish Derek. I'd wanted him to face consequences. But I hadn't wanted to hurt Kira. She was collateral damage in a war she didn't know she was fighting. The professional fallout was worse than even Derek had initially feared. His company's ethics policy had a morality clause. Using company time and resources for personal matters, especially matters that could bring the company into disrepute, was grounds for termination. The investigation would take weeks, but everyone knew how it would end. Derek would lose his job. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with connection requests from people who'd seen Sienna's post. Some were journalists. Some were people who wanted to publicly shame him. His professional network, which he'd spent a decade building, was imploding. And through it all, Celeste lay in her hospital bed, unaware that her husband's entire life was falling apart. I visited her every day and she never asked about the chaos. She didn't know about Bryn showing up at Derek's office. She didn't know about Sienna's viral post. She didn't know that Derek blamed me for everything and had cut me out of his life. She just knew Derek still wasn't visiting much. And on the days when he did show up, he looked haunted, exhausted, destroyed. "Is he okay?" she asked me one afternoon. "He seems so sad lately. More sad than usual." I held her hand and lied. He's just worried about you, honey. Just scared of losing you. She smiled weakly. He's been through so much. Promise me you'll take care of him when I'm gone. He's going to need you. I couldn't promise her that. Because my son had told me he never wanted to see me again. Because in trying to protect her dignity, I destroyed what was left of my family. Tell me in the comments, did I go too far? Should I have left it alone, let Derek make his own mistakes, let Celeste die without knowing the full truth? Or was I right to expose him even if it meant burning everything down? Because I still don't know the answer. And what happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about right and wrong, about justice and mercy, about love and revenge. 3 days after Derek told me I was dead to him, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee, staring at James's watch on my wrist, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The caller ID showed St. Vincent's Hospital. My blood went cold. This was the call. The one I'd been dreading for months. Celeste had taken a turn. They were calling to tell me to come say goodbye. To tell me that the woman I loved like a daughter had finally lost her fight. I answered with shaking hands. Hello? Mrs. Crawford? This is Dr. Amara Okafor, Celeste's oncologist. I'm calling with an update on her condition. I braced myself. Tried to prepare for words I'd never be ready to hear. Mrs. Crawford, I wanted to let you know that Celeste has taken a turn. There it was. The turn. The beginning of the end. We ran some scans yesterday, Dr. Okafor continued, and the results are remarkable. The experimental treatment we started 3 weeks ago is working. Her tumors have shrunk significantly. Her blood work is improving. Her body is responding in ways we didn't expect. I couldn't process what she was saying. The words weren't making sense. I'm sorry, what? Celeste is improving, Mrs. Crawford. Dramatically. We're cautiously optimistic that she could go into remission. It's still early and we need to continue monitoring her closely, but this is the best news we could have hoped for. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. She's getting better? Yes. She's awake, alert, eating solid food. She's asking for you. And for her husband. Can you come to the hospital? I drove to St. Vincent's in a daze. The whole way there, my mind was spinning. Celeste was getting better. The woman I thought was dying, the woman I'd watched waste away for months, was improving. The experimental treatment that we'd all thought was a last-ditch effort with minimal chance of success was actually working. This should have been the best news I'd ever received. This should have been a miracle, an answer to months of desperate prayers. But all I could think was, what have I done? I'd destroyed Derek's life because I thought Celeste was dying. I'd exposed his affairs, ruined his reputation, cost him his job, all because I believed she only had weeks left and he was wasting them with other women. I justified every terrible thing I did by telling myself I was protecting a dying woman's dignity. But she wasn't dying. Not anymore. I parked in the hospital garage and sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to steady my breathing. Trying to figure out what this meant. Trying to understand the magnitude of what I'd done. When I finally made it to room 412, I almost didn't recognize the woman sitting up in bed. Celeste had color in her cheeks. Real color, not the grayish pallor she'd had for months. Her eyes were bright and focused. She was sitting up without help and she was eating. Actually eating. A tray of scrambled eggs and toast sat in front of her, and she was taking real bites, chewing and swallowing like it was the most normal thing in the world. Mama Jan. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. Still weak, still tired, but there was life in it. I walked to her bedside, tears already streaming down my face. Baby girl. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. Her grip was stronger too. Can you believe it? Dr. Okafor says the tumors are shrinking. They're actually shrinking. She said if this continues I might have years. Maybe even beat this thing entirely. I should have been overjoyed. I should have been praising God and crying tears of happiness. Instead, I felt like I was going to be sick. That's incredible, Celeste. That's such wonderful news. I know. I can't believe it. Just last week I thought I was planning my funeral, and now the doctors are talking about remission. About me going home. About me maybe even going back to teaching next fall. She was glowing. Despite the hospital gown and the force still in her arm and the machine still monitoring her vitals, she looked alive in a way she hadn't in months. Hope was a powerful medicine and it was radiating from her. I can't wait to tell Derek. Where is he? Is he at work? Can you call him and tell him to come? I want to see his face when he hears the news. My heart sank into my stomach. I'll try calling him. I stepped out into the hallway and dialed Derek's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. I sent a text. Call me. It's about Celeste. Important news. No response. I went back into the room and plastered on a smile. He's probably in a meeting. I'll keep trying. Celeste nodded, but I could see disappointment flicker across her face. Even now, even with this miraculous news, Derek wasn't there. I stayed with her for 2 hours. She talked about her students, about the cards they'd sent, about how she couldn't wait to see them again. She talked about the house, about all the things she wanted to do once she got home. Plant a garden. Repaint the bedroom. Maybe get a dog. She talked about Derek too. About how hard this had been on him. About how much he'd been struggling with watching her suffer. About how relieved he'd be to know she was getting better. Every word was a knife in my heart. I tried calling Derek 3 more times. Nothing. Finally, I told Celeste I needed to run an errand and I'd be back. I drove to Derek's house, the house with the wraparound porch where we'd had so many Sunday dinners. Where Celeste had insisted on setting up a guest room just for me. Where I'd once felt like part of a real family. The house was dark. Derek's BMW wasn't in the driveway. I knocked anyway, rang the doorbell, peered through the windows. Nothing. A neighbor was getting his mail across the street. I walked over to him, a man named Howard who I'd met at a few of Derek and Celeste's barbecues. Howard, have you seen Derek recently? He looked uncomfortable. Oh hey Janice. Yeah actually, I saw him leaving a few days ago. Wednesday I think. He had suitcases in his car. Lots of them. I asked if everything was okay and he said he was going out of town for a while. Didn't say where or for how long. Wednesday. 3 days ago. The same day he'd called me and told me I was dead to him. Did he say anything else? No, just that he needed to get away. He looked pretty rough, honestly. Like he hadn't slept in days. I figured it was because of Celeste, you know. That maybe he needed a break from the hospital visits. I thanked Howard and walked back to my car. Derek had left. He'd packed up and disappeared. And he hadn't told anyone where he was going. I tried his phone again. This time it went straight to voicemail. He'd either turned it off or blocked my number. I sat in my car in his driveway, and the full weight of what I'd done crashed down on me. Celeste was getting better. The miracle we'd all prayed for was happening. She was going to live. She was going to go home, back to teaching, back to her life. But Derek was gone. The son I'd raised, the man Celeste loved, he'd run. He'd lost his job, his reputation, his relationships, and he'd run. And it was my fault. I'd been so convinced I was doing the right thing. So sure that exposing Derek's betrayals was about protecting Celeste. But if I was honest with myself, really honest, it wasn't about protection. It was about punishment. It was about my own anger and disappointment. It was about the son I thought I'd raised versus the man he'd become. I'd appointed myself judge and jury. I'd decided Derek didn't deserve privacy or mercy or the chance to handle his grief in his own way. I'd decided his coping mechanisms, however unhealthy, were unforgivable. And I'd systematically destroyed his life to prove a point. And now Celeste, the woman I'd claimed to be protecting, was getting better. And she was going to come home to an empty house. To a husband who'd fled rather than face what I'd done to him. I drove back to the hospital. Celeste was sleeping when I got there, a peaceful sleep that looked nothing like the pain-racked unconsciousness she'd been slipping into for months. I sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her breathe. In and out. Steady and strong. When she woke up an hour later, she smiled at me. Did you reach Derek? I couldn't lie anymore. Couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Couldn't keep carrying the weight of what I'd done alone. Celeste, I need to tell you something. Actually, I need to tell you a lot of things. And you're going to hate me when I'm done. But I can't keep lying to you. Her smile faded. What is it? So I told her everything. I told her about following Derek. About watching him with Bryn at the restaurant, with Sienna at the wine bar, with Kira at his house. I told her about the weeks I spent creating fake profiles, befriending these women online, gathering evidence like I was building a case file. I told her about the anonymous messages I sent. About the photos of Derek with different women. About the picture of her hospital bracelet that I'd taken without her knowledge. About exposing him to all 3 women at once. I told her about Bryn showing up at his office screaming. About Sienna's Facebook post that went viral. About Kira's devastation at discovering she'd been lied to. About the investigation at Derek's company and his administrative leave. I told her about Derek calling me furious, accusing me of ruining his life. About him figuring out I was behind it all. About him telling me I was dead to him and hanging up. And I told her that he was gone. That he'd left town 3 days ago with suitcases full of his belongings. That he'd turned off his phone. That he wasn't here to celebrate her miraculous recovery because I'd driven him away. When I finished, Celeste was quiet. She stared at her hands, at the hospital bracelet I'd photographed without her consent, and she didn't say anything for a long time. The silence was unbearable. I wanted her to yell at me, to tell me I was horrible, to ask me to leave. Anything would have been better than that awful, heavy silence. Finally she spoke. Her voice was soft, but there was something in it I'd never heard before. Disappointment. I asked you not to hate him. I know. I specifically asked you not to hate him, Janice. I told you he was going to need you when I was gone. And instead of respecting my wishes, you destroyed his life. Tears were streaming down my face. I thought I was protecting you. No. She looked up at me and her eyes were hard. You weren't protecting me. You were punishing him. There's a difference. He was betraying you. He was with other women while you lay here dying. I knew about the women, Janice. I told you I knew. And I chose to let it go. I chose to die without anger, without bitterness. I chose to love him anyway because that's what love is. It's choosing someone even when they're at their worst. But you weren't dying anymore. The treatment worked. You're getting better. That doesn't change what you did. You didn't know I was going to get better. When you sent those messages, when you exposed him, you thought I had weeks left. You did it knowing I wanted peace. Knowing I wanted to die, believing my husband loved me. I couldn't argue with that. She was right. You did it because you loved me, Celeste continued. I understand that. I know your heart was in the right place somewhere deep down. But you also did it because you were angry. Because you couldn't accept that Derek was handling his grief differently than you thought he should. Because you needed to be right more than you needed to be kind. Every word was true. Every word cut deeper than the last. Where is he now? Celeste asked. I don't know. He left town. His neighbor said he had suitcases. He won't answer his phone. Celeste closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with tears. So I'm getting my life back, but I'm losing my husband. I'm getting a miracle, but it's empty because the person I want to share it with is gone. I'm so sorry, Celeste. I'm so incredibly sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't bring him back, does it? She turned her face away from me toward the window. The afternoon sun was streaming in, making her look almost ethereal. She was getting stronger every day. The doctors said she might even go home within a week. But home would be empty now. Because of me. You should go, Celeste said quietly. I need some time to process this. To think. Celeste. Please, Janice. Just go. I stood up, my legs shaking. I wanted to say something else, to apologize again, to somehow make it better. But there was nothing I could say. Nothing that would undo what I'd done. I walked to the door and paused. I love you. I hope you know that. Everything I did because I love you. Celeste didn't turn around. I know. But love without wisdom is just destruction wearing a prettier name. I left the hospital and sat in my car in the parking garage. The same parking garage where I'd cried after Celeste told me she knew about the women and still loved Derek. Where I'd made the decision to start documenting everything. Where I'd chosen revenge over trust. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button because the final part of this story will show you whether a family can survive the kind of damage I caused, or if some things, once broken, can never be put back together. I thought I was teaching my son a lesson about loyalty and love. I thought I was protecting a dying woman's dignity. But Celeste wasn't dying anymore. She was living. And she was right. I hadn't been protecting her. I'd been punishing Derek for disappointing me. For not being the son I'd imagined I'd raised. For handling his grief in ways I didn't approve of. And in doing so, I'd taken away her choice. She'd chosen to forgive him, to love him despite his failures, to die without bitterness. And I'd decided my judgment was more important than her choice. I drove home and sat in my empty house, surrounded by photos of Derek at every age. Baby Derek. Little boy Derek. Teenager Derek. College graduate Derek. Wedding day Derek standing next to Celeste, both of them glowing with hope for their future. I'd worked so hard to give him a good life. Sacrificed so much. And in one moment of righteous anger, I'd destroyed everything. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment I hoped it was Derek. But it wasn't. It was Kira. The young nursing student who'd been caught in the crossfire of my revenge. The text said, I don't know who you are, but thank you for telling me the truth. It hurt, but I needed to know. I hope his wife is okay. I've been praying for her. I stared at that text for a long time. Kira was praying for Celeste. The innocent girl who'd been lied to, who'd had to drop out of nursing school because of the guilt, was praying for the woman she'd unwittingly wronged. And I'd been the one to tell her the truth. But had it been truth-telling or had it been weaponizing the truth? Had I freed her from a lie, or had I burdened her with unnecessary guilt? Here's what I need you to tell me in the comments. When someone you love is being betrayed, is it your responsibility to expose it, even if they've chosen to look the other way? Is the truth always worth telling, or are there times when protecting someone's peace matters more than protecting their pride? Because I genuinely don't know anymore. And what happened in the final chapter of this story made me question everything I thought I knew about family, forgiveness, and what it really means to love someone. 6 months passed like a decade. Celeste went into full remission. The doctors called it remarkable, one of those cases they'd write about in medical journals. The experimental treatment had worked beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Her tumors had shrunk to nearly nothing. Her strength came back gradually, but it came back. First, she could walk around her hospital room without getting winded. Then she could walk the hallways. Then she went home. I heard all of this secondhand. From her doctors, who still had me listed as her emergency contact. From friends at church who visited her. From social media posts where she documented her recovery journey for the hundreds of people who'd been following her story. But not from Celeste herself. She didn't call me. Didn't text. Didn't invite me over. I'd go to church on Sundays and see her from across the sanctuary. Her hair was growing back in soft curls, shorter than before but beautiful. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost, and color had returned to her cheeks. She looked alive. She looked like herself again. But when our eyes met, she'd give me a small, sad smile and look away. Not angry. Just distant. Like I was someone she used to know. I wanted to respect her space, give her time to heal from everything. But God, it hurt. It hurt to lose the daughter I'd never birthed. To lose the woman who used to call me Mama Jan and invite me to Sunday dinners and tell me I was the mother she'd always wanted. I'd broken that. In trying to protect her, I'd lost her. And Derek? I heard about him through the grapevine too. He'd resurfaced after about a month, but not in Atlanta. Someone from church had a cousin in Charlotte who saw him at a grocery store. He was working at a financial planning firm, but not in management. Just a regular analyst position. The kind of job he'd had right out of college before he'd climbed the corporate ladder. He'd lost everything in Atlanta. His reputation, his career, his 6-figure salary. Starting over in a new city at 32, working for a fraction of what he used to make. I tried calling him once a week for the first month. Every call went to voicemail. Every text went unanswered. Eventually I stopped trying. He'd told me I was dead to him, and he'd meant it. I spent those 6 months in a kind of purgatory. Going through the motions of living but not really living. I'd go to work at the hospital where I'd picked up a few shifts to fill the empty hours. I'd go to church. I'd come home to my empty house and stare at photos of the family I used to have. Photos of Derek as a baby, as a little boy, as a teenager. Photos of his wedding day. Photos of Sunday dinners at his and Celeste's house. All of us smiling like we'd always be together. Photos of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. I prayed more in those 6 months than I had in years. Begged God for forgiveness. Asked him to restore what I'd broken. Pleaded for another chance to make things right. But the heavens felt silent. My prayers echoed back to me unanswered. People at church tried to be kind. They'd ask how I was doing and I'd say fine. They'd mention they'd seen Celeste looking good, and I'd say I was glad to hear it. They'd ask if I'd heard from Derek, and I'd change the subject. Nobody knew the full story. Nobody knew what I'd done. They just knew that somehow, during Celeste's recovery, our family had fractured. They probably assumed it was the stress of the illness. The strain of watching someone you love almost die. They had no idea it was because I'd systematically destroyed my son's life. I thought about Celeste's words constantly. You weren't protecting me. You were punishing him. There's a difference. She was right. I'd wrapped my revenge in the language of protection, but it was revenge all the same. Righteous anger that burned everything it touched. I thought about Derek too. About what he'd said on the phone. That he'd been grieving for a year already. That watching Celeste die slowly was destroying him. That the women were his way of trying to feel human again. I still didn't agree with what he'd done. Still thought there were better ways to handle it. But I understood it better now. Understood that people in pain don't always make good choices. That grief doesn't follow rules or timelines. That sometimes survival looks ugly and desperate and wrong. And I understood that my son had needed grace, not judgment. He'd needed his mother to hold his hand through the hardest thing he'd ever faced, not to hold up a mirror and force him to confront his failures. Around the 5-month mark, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patricia Kwan, and she had kind eyes and a no-nonsense way of talking that reminded me of myself when I was still nursing. I told her everything. The whole ugly story. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she asked me one question: "What were you really angry about?" I started to say Derek's infidelity, Celeste's suffering, the unfairness of it all. But she shook her head. "No. What were you really angry about? Deep down." I sat with that question for a long time. And finally I said it out loud. I was angry that my sacrifice didn't matter. I worked double shifts for years to put Derek through college. I gave up everything to give him opportunities. And he grew up to be someone who could betray his wife. All that sacrifice, and I still raised someone capable of that. Dr. Kwan nodded. So you felt like he'd wasted your sacrifice? Like he owed you something in return for everything you'd given up? Yes. And when he didn't live up to that expectation, you punished him for it. I started crying. Because she was right. This wasn't just about protecting Celeste. It was about my own disappointment. My own sense that Derek owed me better. That I deserved to have raised a perfect son because of how much I'd sacrificed to raise him at all. Children don't owe us perfection, Dr. Kwan said gently. They just owe us their best effort at being human. And sometimes that looks messy. I kept going to therapy. Kept trying to untangle the web of my own motivations and mistakes. Kept trying to figure out how to live with what I'd done. And then, on a Tuesday evening 6 months after everything fell apart, my phone rang. I was sitting in my living room looking through old photo albums. There was one of Derek at his high school graduation, mortarboard tilted at an angle, huge smile on his face. I'd been so proud that day. So sure I'd done everything right. The caller ID said, Derek Mobile. My heart stopped. I stared at the screen for 3 rings, afraid to answer. Afraid of what he'd say. Afraid he was calling to tell me officially, legally, to never contact him again. On the 4th ring I answered. Hello? Mom? His voice was quiet, cautious. Not warm but not angry either. Just careful. Derek. My voice broke on his name. Silence. Long and heavy. Then he spoke. Celeste called me. She told me she's doing better. That she's been cancer-free for 4 months. She is. She's strong. She's back to teaching. She looks like herself again. That's good. I'm glad. More silence. Then, she also told me what you did. All of it. My stomach dropped. I'd wondered if Celeste would tell him. Wondered if she'd kept my confession to herself or if she'd share it. Now I knew. Derek, Let me finish. He took a deep breath. I was a coward, Mom. I was running from watching her die. I convinced myself I was grieving, that I had a right to move on because she was already gone. But the truth is I was just scared. Scared of the pain. Scared of losing her. Scared of sitting in that hospital room and watching the woman I loved disappear. I couldn't speak. Couldn't interrupt even if I'd wanted to. And you held up a mirror and made me see exactly what I was. What I'd become. Someone who ran from hard things. Someone who betrayed the person who needed me most because I couldn't handle my own pain. I went too far, I whispered. I destroyed your life, Derek. Your job, your reputation, everything. I went way too far. Yeah, you did. His voice was firm. What you did was invasive and manipulative and cruel. Creating fake profiles, stalking me, exposing me like that. It was wrong, Mom. Really wrong. I know. But I was wrong too. We both destroyed things that mattered. You destroyed my career and my privacy. I destroyed my marriage and my integrity. We both hurt Celeste in different ways. I was crying now, silent tears streaming down my face. I thought I was protecting her. I know you did. And I thought I was protecting myself. We were both wrong. Another long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Could picture him wherever he was in Charlotte, in some apartment I'd never seen, living a life I knew nothing about. Celeste wants me to come home, he said finally. She says she'll forgive me if I try to forgive you. My breath caught. She wants you to come home? She says she beat cancer for a reason. Says she's not going to waste her second chance on anger and bitterness. She wants to rebuild our marriage. Start over. Try again. That's incredible, Derek. She loves you so much. I know. I don't deserve it, but I know. He paused. She asked me if I could forgive you. If I could try to rebuild our relationship too. And will you? My voice was barely a whisper. Long silence. So long I thought he might have hung up. Then, I don't know yet. I'm not going to lie to you and say everything's fine. I'm still angry. Still hurt. Still processing everything that happened. But I'm willing to try. For her. And maybe, eventually, for us too. That's more than I deserve. Probably. But forgiveness isn't about deserving it, is it? It's about choosing to move forward even when you've been hurt. Celeste is teaching me that. She's teaching both of us. I wiped my eyes. When are you coming back to Atlanta? End of the month. I've been interviewing for some positions here, but Celeste wants me home. And I want to be home. I want to try to fix what I broke. If she's willing to give me another chance, then I need to show up for it. She's an incredible woman. She is. She's better than both of us, Mom. Better than we deserve. He paused again. I should go. But I wanted you to know I'm coming back. And that maybe, eventually, we can figure out how to be a family again. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. But I'm willing to try if you are. I am. God, Derek, I am. I'm so sorry for everything. For what I did, for how I did it, for all of it. I know you are. And I'm sorry too. For betraying Celeste. For letting you down. For being someone you had to expose because I wasn't man enough to face my own failures. We both have a lot to work on. Yeah, we do. I could hear a small smile in his voice. Not a full smile, not forgiveness, but something softer than the anger that had been there before. I'll call you when I get back to Atlanta. Maybe we can meet for coffee. Figure out where we go from here. I'd like that. Okay. Take care, Mom. You too, son. He hung up and I sat in my living room holding my phone, crying harder than I'd cried in months. But these tears were different. They weren't just grief and regret. They were relief. Hope. The possibility of redemption. Derek was coming home. He was willing to try. It wasn't forgiveness yet, wasn't restoration, but it was a door left slightly ajar. An invitation to try again. If you've made it to the end of this story, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the stories that hurt the most are the ones we need to tell. The following Sunday, I went to church early. I sat in my usual pew, hands folded in my lap, praying for wisdom and grace and strength for what was coming. Celeste arrived about 10 minutes before the service started. She was with a group of friends from her small group, laughing at something someone said. Her hair was still short, soft curls framing her face. She wore a yellow dress that made her skin glow. She looked radiant, alive. Our eyes met across the sanctuary and for a moment, we just looked at each other. Then Celeste smiled. A real smile. Not the sad, distant one she'd been giving me for months. A real, warm, genuine smile. She excused herself from her friends and walked over to me. My heart was pounding. Hey, Mama January. I burst into tears immediately. Celeste, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly. She held up her hand. I know. And I'm still processing it all. Still working through the hurt and the betrayal of trust. But Derek told me he called you. Told me he's willing to try to forgive. And if he can do that, then I can too. I don't deserve your forgiveness. None of us deserve the grace we're given. That's what makes it grace. She sat down next to me and took my hand. What you did was wrong. Invasive and hurtful and destructive. But I also know why you did it. You love me. And you love Derek even when he's disappointing you. That love was just twisted up in anger and fear. I'm going to therapy, I said. I'm working on it. On understanding why I did what I did. On being better. Good. That's good. She squeezed my hand. Derek's coming home at the end of the month. We're going to try to rebuild our marriage. It's going to be hard. There's a lot of trust to repair. A lot of hurt to work through. But I want to try. He's lucky to have you. We're both lucky to have second chances. Me with my health. Him with our marriage. And you with our family. She looked at me seriously. But Janice, I need you to understand something. You can't do this again. You can't interfere in our marriage, in our problems, in our lives like that. If Derek and I are going to make this work, we need space to make our own mistakes and our own choices. I understand. I do. I promise. I'm going to hold you to that. She smiled again, softer this time. But I'm also going to invite you to Sunday dinner once Derek gets back. Because you're still family. And family shows up even when it's messy. I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. Celeste hugged me and I held on to her like she might disappear. This woman who'd faced death and chosen grace. Who'd been betrayed by her husband and her mother-in-law in different ways and still chose forgiveness. Who refused to let suffering make her bitter. She was teaching us all what real love looked like. Let me ask you one final question and I really want you to answer in the comments. Have you ever done something you thought was right, only to realize later that you were driven by your own pain and disappointment rather than genuine love? How did you find your way back? Because that's what this story is really about. It's not about infidelity or revenge or even cancer. It's about how we all make mistakes when we're hurting. How we all justify our worst behavior by calling it protection or justice or love. And how, if we're lucky, we get people in our lives who are willing to extend grace even when we don't deserve it. Derek came back to Atlanta 3 weeks later. I know because Celeste texted me a photo. It was taken from her front porch, and it showed Derek's car pulling into the driveway. Just that. No caption. Just the image of him coming home. I stared at that photo for a long time. At the house with the wraparound porch where we used to have Sunday dinners. At the driveway where I'd once stood at 2 in the morning, confronting him with evidence of his betrayals. At the promise of a new beginning I'd almost destroyed completely. Derek and I met for coffee a week after he got back. It was awkward at first. We sat across from each other at a Starbucks, both of us holding our cups like shields, neither of us quite sure what to say. Finally, Derek spoke. "I'm sorry I disappeared. I should have at least told you where I was going. You had every right to leave. I drove you away. You did. But I also ran away instead of facing what I'd done. That's on me." He took a sip of his coffee. "I'm in therapy now too. Trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I thought betraying Celeste was easier than sitting with my grief. What have you learned?" He smiled sadly. "That I'm not as good at handling hard things as I thought I was. That I need to ask for help instead of self-destructing. That loving someone means showing up even when it hurts." We talked for over an hour. Not about forgiveness or moving forward, just about where we were. What we'd learned. How we were trying to be better. It wasn't resolution, but it was honest. It was real. As we were leaving, Derek hugged me. A real hug, not just a polite gesture. "We're going to get through this, Mom. It's going to take time, but we're going to figure it out." "I hope so, baby. I really hope so." Now, 6 months after that coffee meeting, we're still figuring it out. Derek and Celeste are rebuilding their marriage. They're in couples therapy. They're learning how to trust each other again. It's slow, messy work, but they're doing it. Derek and I talk once a week. We're rebuilding too. Learning how to be mother and son again without the weight of expectations and disappointments crushing us. Learning that love sometimes means letting go of who we thought people should be and accepting who they actually are. Celeste is still cancer-free. She's back teaching full-time and her students adore her. She started a support group for cancer survivors at our church. She's living her second chance with intention and grace. And me? I'm learning that righteous anger and real love aren't the same thing. That protecting someone sometimes means respecting their choices even when you disagree. That family is built on grace, not perfection. I thought I was teaching my son a lesson about loyalty and love. Instead, I learned that revenge, even righteous revenge, burns everything it touches. That good intentions don't excuse harmful actions. That sometimes the people we're trying to protect don't need protecting. They need the freedom to make their own choices and their own mistakes. Derek and I are still finding our way back to each other. Celeste is the bridge between us, the woman who refused to let dying make her bitter, who refused to let living make her vengeful. She's teaching us both what real love looks like. It's messy. It's painful. It requires more grace than either of us knew we had. It's showing up even when you're hurt. It's choosing forgiveness even when you're angry. It's believing that people can change, can grow, can become better than their worst moments. Last Sunday, I went to Derek and Celeste's house for dinner. The first time I'd been back since everything happened. We sat on that wraparound porch after we ate, watching the sun set, and Celeste reached over and took both our hands. "We made it," she said simply. "We actually made it." And we had. Broken, scarred, still healing, but together. A family that had been destroyed and was slowly, painfully, beautifully being rebuilt. That's my story. That's how I destroyed my son's life trying to save his wife's dignity. How I learned that love without wisdom is just destruction wearing a prettier name. How a woman who faced death taught us all how to really live. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not judging too harshly. Thank you for understanding that we're all just doing our best in impossible situations, and sometimes our best is still pretty terrible. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment about your own experiences with family, forgiveness, and finding your way back from mistakes you thought were unforgivable. We're all in this together, trying to figure out how to love each other better. And remember, grace isn't about deserving it. It's about extending it anyway, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because that's the only way any of us make it through this life intact.